My parents left me at the track saying, "This will be a lesson to you." I didn't forgive. Disappeared for 20 years. Now they look for me every day. I never imagined I'd tell this story out loud, let alone write it for strangers to read. But something cracked inside me after I saw a TikTok about parents teaching their kids lessons by punishing them in extreme ways. Suddenly, it wasn't just a memory anymore, it was a scar that started burning again. I'm 36 now, but I can still remember exactly how the heat felt on my skin that day, the sting of gasoline in the air, and the bitter taste of betrayal in the back of my throat. That summer, 20 years ago, was the day everything changed. My parents, Frank and Carol, were obsessed with building character. That was their excuse for everything. If I forgot to mow the lawn, I'd be yanked out of bed at 2 a.m. with a flashlight and told to do it in the dark. Missed the bus? Didn't matter that Mom was driving right past my school on her way to work. I was walking, even in the rain. According to them, life wasn't supposed to be comfortable. It was supposed to be a series of hard lessons, and it was their job to make sure I learned them all. That July morning didn't seem any different at first. We were driving home from visiting my sister Julia at her college 4 hours away. I was in the back seat, half asleep, earbuds in, listening to the same playlist on repeat. I remember thinking I couldn't wait to get home. Just a couple more hours and I'd be back in my room with a cold soda and a fan blowing directly in my face. Then my dad pulled into a gas station off some random exit on I-75. We were in the middle of nowhere, not a town in sight, just dusty fields and one beat-up convenience store that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. "Reed," Dad said sharply from the driver's seat. "Go inside and grab me a coffee." "Black." I blinked, pulled out my earbuds and looked around. We weren't near any of the usual stops. Still, I grabbed the few crumpled bills he handed me and went inside. The place was empty except for a cashier who looked like the heat had drained the life out of him. The coffee machine was out of order, so he offered to brew a fresh pot. I waited, sweating through my shirt, trying not to think about how annoyed Dad would be at the delay. When the coffee was finally ready, I walked outside. The car was gone. At first, I thought maybe they had moved to another pump. Or maybe Dad had driven around back to check the tires. I walked around the station, coffee cup trembling in my hand. Then I saw our old maroon sedan pulling onto the highway. Slowly. Casually. No honking. No waving. They weren't coming back. My first thought was, this is a joke. They'll loop around. I stood there on the curb trying not to spill the coffee, watching their taillights disappear. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. "Let's see how long it takes you to get home. Consider this a problem-solving lesson." Smiling face with smiling eyes. I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping. I tried calling them straight to voicemail. Again. And again. A few minutes later, another message came through. "Don't bother calling. Your father says you need to figure this out for yourself. See you when you make it back." I sat down on the curb. The coffee cup was still warm, the plastic lid fogged up. I didn't even like coffee. That tiny detail felt so absurd that it almost made me laugh. But I didn't laugh. Because this wasn't even the worst thing they'd done to me. 2 years earlier, when I was 14, they locked me out of the house in February because I brought home a C+ in chemistry. Said that maybe a night in the cold would motivate me to try harder. I broke into the garage that time and slept under a stack of old towels. When they found out, they screamed at me for breaking the window and made me pay to replace it with money I'd earned working at a fast food place after school. But that morning at the gas station, that was when something inside me snapped. Or maybe it didn't snap. Maybe it just hardened. I looked down at the coffee in my hands and realized I was done. Done playing their games. Done proving anything. Done hoping they'd suddenly treat me like a son instead of a burden. I had about $140 on me from my summer job as a lifeguard at the community pool. My backpack was still in the trunk of the car, but I had my phone, wallet, and the cheap MP3 player I never let out of my pocket. I walked back inside and asked the cashier how far the nearest bus station was. He blinked at me, chewing his lip, then pointed vaguely down the road. "About 2 miles that way." "You all right, kid?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Just need to make a call." There was only one person I could think of. My Aunt Valerie, my mom's sister. The black sheep of the family. My parents had cut her off years ago, claiming she enabled weakness. What that really meant was she bought me a new phone once after they took mine away for speaking up at dinner. After that, they said she was a bad influence and told me never to speak to her again. But I still had her number. She picked up on the second ring. "Reed? Is that you? What's wrong?" "They left me," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "They left me at a gas station." There was silence on the other end. and then the sound of keys jangling. "Where are you exactly?" she asked. "Give me the name of the place." "I can't," I said. "There's no name, just a store and a pump and fields. I'm somewhere off I-75. "Stay there," she said. "Don't move. I'll figure it out." She did. Somehow. She found a local taxi company. This was before Uber was a thing, and prepaid them over the phone to take me to the nearest Greyhound station. Then she bought me a bus ticket online and sent me the confirmation code. The ride to the station was awkward and silent. The driver didn't ask questions, and I was grateful for that. I texted Mom once. "I'm not coming home." Her reply came instantly. "Don't you dare call Valerie. If you don't come home right now, don't bother coming at all. Your father is furious." I didn't answer. I turned off my phone and shoved it deep into my pocket. The bus ride took 6 hours. I stared out the window the entire time, watching the scenery roll by in a blur. I didn't cry. I didn't think. I just floated. Aunt Valerie was waiting at the terminal when I arrived. She wrapped me in the kind of hug I hadn't felt in years. No judgment. No lectures. Just warmth. "You're safe now," she said softly. "We'll figure it all out." I moved in with her that night. Back home, apparently chaos unfolded. My sister Julia told me later that our parents had driven back to the gas station hours after leaving me, expecting I'd still be there waiting for them with tears in my eyes and a heartfelt apology for being dramatic. When they realized I was gone, they filed a missing persons report, but Aunt Valerie had already started filing for temporary custody. The police dismissed the case once the paperwork came through. I never returned to that house. Valerie helped me enroll in an alternative school, and I eventually earned my GED. I got certified in construction and repair, started picking up odd jobs. By the time I was 21, I was running my own crew. By 25, I had a growing business and a small house of my own. No more games. No more life lessons. I married a woman who believes in compassion, not control. We have 2 kids now, and I've never once used punishment as a teaching method. You don't earn respect through fear. That's not strength. That's cowardice dressed up as authority. For 2 decades, I lived with the peace of knowing I had escaped. I never called my parents, never visited, never sent a card. I thought I'd buried that part of my life for good. Then, just yesterday, everything changed again. My office phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in 20 years. I didn't answer, but I knew right then. Somehow, they'd found me. And they weren't finished. I have this rule. Never check your phone during a meeting. It's a habit I stuck to after building my construction business from the ground up. When I'm in that boardroom going over estimates, timelines, or zoning permits, my mind is fully there. No distractions. No notifications. Total focus. But when I stepped out of the conference room yesterday and saw 39 missed calls, my stomach turned to ice. Most of the numbers were unfamiliar, probably burners or blocked caller IDs. But 3 of them, 3 were from a number I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. My sister Julia. I hadn't spoken to her since I was 16. The first voicemail was her crying. Her voice was shaky, barely holding it together. "Reed, please just call me back. Mom and Dad, they found you. I didn't tell them anything, I swear. They're spiraling. Please, just call me. Not them. Me." I stood in the hallway outside my office, phone glued to my ear, listening to voicemail after voicemail. Most were from my parents. Some guilt-trippy, some outright aggressive. I heard everything from "your mother is ill" to "we're family. How dare you ignore us?" And then came the one that sealed it for me. My dad's voice, slightly slurred. "You think you're better than us? With your company and your little office? Don't forget who raised you. We made you who you are. You owe us." That line, "You owe us." It rang in my head like a fire alarm. I sat in my truck for a long time after that, watching my phone light up again and again with more calls, more texts. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I texted Julia. "Meeting tomorrow. Denny's on 5th. 7 a.m. Come alone. Or don't come at all." She replied in less than a minute. "I'll be there." The next morning, I got to the diner early and ordered coffee. I hadn't seen Julia in 2 decades, but the second she walked through the door, I recognized her. Same shy posture, same nervous habit of picking at napkins between her fingers. She slid into the booth, eyes already misty. "I'm sorry," she blurted, not even sitting down properly. "I didn't tell them anything. They found your company website. Your business has a page now with your face on it. They've been watching for weeks." I took a sip of my coffee. My hands didn't shake. "Start from the beginning," I said. She nodded, folding and unfolding the napkin again. "They're losing the house. It's bad, Reed. Dad's been gambling, poker, sports bets, even crypto stuff. And Mom's maxed out 4 credit cards in the last 6 months. Shopping. Furniture, mostly. God knows where it all is. They're 3 months behind on the mortgage. They need 50 grand to catch up." I stared at her for a few seconds. "And they think I'm going to give it to them. They're desperate," she whispered. "They think you owe them because you're doing well now." I laughed. Not out of amusement, but the kind of laugh you let out when you're so far past disbelief that it turns into something darker. "They left me on the side of the road," I said. "They didn't look back. They didn't wonder if I was okay. That day they stopped being parents. That was a decision they made." "I know," she said softly. "Believe me, I know. But they're still Mom and Dad." "No," I said. "They were Mom and Dad. What they are now is a cautionary tale." The waitress brought fresh coffee. Julia didn't touch hers. "I tried to stop them," she said. "They want to come see you. In person. I told them not to, but they're coming anyway," I finished. She nodded. I took a breath, leaned back in the booth, and pulled a 20 from my wallet. "I'm paying for breakfast, but after this, you need to block my number. And let them deal with the mess they made. You don't owe them either. Read, please." "No," I said calmly. "I mean it. You're my sister. I love you, but I'm not your safety net. And I'm not their retirement plan." She looked like she wanted to argue, but I was already sliding out of the booth. I paused at the edge of the table. "They show up tomorrow, let them. I won't be hiding." And then I left. When I got back to my office, my voicemail box was full. Emails were flooding in too. Some from distant cousins, some from people I hadn't heard from since childhood. Apparently, my parents were going around telling everyone I had abandoned them in their time of need. That I was rich now and refusing to help the very people who gave me everything. Classic Frank and Carol, rewriting history to play the victims. What they didn't know is that I had already spent the last 24 hours making a few quiet calls of my own. See, my company does more than just renovate homes. We occasionally work with real estate firms, and we've developed partnerships with a few banks and lenders over the years. When I found out they were 3 months behind on their mortgage, I called in a favor. Turned out their mortgage had already gone into default. And the house, my childhood house, was on track to be auctioned off within the month. I made one offer. Quiet, clean, all legal. And it was accepted. They didn't know it yet, but their house no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. They'll be walking into my office tomorrow thinking they have leverage. That they can manipulate me, shame me, that I'll feel obligated to bail them out just because we share DNA. But the truth is, I'm done feeling guilty. I've spent 20 years building a life from the ground up. I crawled out of a hole they dug and left me in. I learned how to survive because of them, in spite of them, whatever you want to call it. They want to see what I've made of myself? Fine. Let them see. They want to test my strength? Let them come. But I'm not that scared 16-year-old anymore. Standing on the curb with a cup of coffee in my hand, wondering why his parents thought that was funny. I'm not waiting for closure. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm not interested in healing their wounds when they never once acknowledged the ones they gave me. What they're about to walk into isn't a family reunion. It's the consequences. And this time, I'm the one teaching the lesson. The receptionist buzzed me just after 10. "Reed, there's a couple here. They say they're your parents." For a second, I just stared at the phone. I'd known this was coming. Julia warned me. The voicemails confirmed it. I'd even had my lawyer in the office earlier that morning, making sure everything was legally airtight. But still, hearing those words out loud, it hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. Cleared my throat. You can send them up. I stood near the window of my office as they stepped off the elevator and into the hall. Frank and Carol, in the flesh, 20 years older but instantly recognizable. Dad wore the same ill-fitting brown suit he always wore to church when I was a kid. Like putting on that dusty jacket would somehow grant him authority. Mom had on a faded floral dress I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. The kind she used to wear to PTA meetings when she wanted to seem respectable. She burst into tears the second she saw me through the glass. "My baby," she sobbed, hands pressed to her mouth. "Look at you. You're grown." She moved to hug me the moment she entered my office. I stepped back. "Let's keep this professional," I said, pointing to the 2 chairs across from my desk. Dad scoffed, puffing his chest out. "That any way to talk to your mother?" I looked him straight in the eye. "You didn't spend 20 years trying to find me because you missed me. You found me because you're desperate." Mom sniffled, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Reed, we just want to talk." "So talk," I said, sitting down and folding my hands on the desk. They sat opposite me, shifting uncomfortably. Dad cleared his throat and launched into what I assume was meant to sound like a heartfelt monologue. "We made mistakes," he began, in that condescending tone I remembered all too well. "Sure, we were tough. But look at you now. You turned out just fine." "You left me at a gas station," I said flatly. "That was a teaching moment," Mom said quickly. "You always needed to learn the hard way." "That was abandonment," I corrected. "That was the last straw after years of emotional abuse and manipulation. You didn't teach me independence. You taught me how to survive without you. We came back for you." Dad snapped. "We turned around. You weren't there." "Yeah," I said. Because I figured out in that moment that I deserved better than parents who thought cruelty was character building. Silence. Mom cried harder. Dad looked like he was about to explode. Then came the real reason they were there. "We're losing the house," he said, voice lower now. "Bad investments. Mistakes. The bank's threatening to foreclose unless we come up with a significant amount. 175,000. My eyebrows went up. That's quite a bit more than the 50 Julia mentioned. They exchanged a look. I wasn't surprised. Dad leaned forward. "You've done well for yourself. You have this company. Employees. Clients. A big office. Surely you can help your own parents." I stood up, walked to my filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder I'd been waiting to use all week. "I thought you might bring that up," I said, placing the folder in front of them. "What's this?" Mom asked, eyes red. "Documentation," I replied. "Of the house." Dad's eyes narrowed. "You looked into our finances?" "No," I said. "I bought them." "What?" "I bought your mortgage. When I found out it was about to go into default, I worked with the lender and made an offer. It was accepted. Legally, the house no longer belongs to you. It took a few seconds for it to register." Mom's mouth dropped open. Dad went pale. You can't do that," he stammered. "I already did." "You're evicting us?" Mom gasped, looking horrified. I nodded. "You have 30 days to vacate the property. After that, the house will be demolished." Dad stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You ungrateful little bastard. After everything we did for you. You gave me 30 seconds at a gas station. I'm giving you 30 days, I said, remaining seated. That's when Dad lunged. It wasn't a full-blown attack, more like a blind, rage-filled movement toward my desk, fists clenched and jaw tight. But I didn't flinch. Because I had security waiting just outside the office. The 2 guards stepped in instantly, one placing a hand on Dad's shoulder, the other gently but firmly escorting Mom out as she wailed about how I was destroying the family. I watched them through the glass wall of my office, calmly recording everything on my phone. Just in case. As they reached the elevator, Mom turned and screamed, "You'll burn in hell for this." Dad added, "We'll sue. We'll ruin you." I didn't say a word. Just lifted my phone and kept filming. When they were gone, I sat back down and took a breath. It was done. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Julia. They just called me sobbing. "What did you do?" I stared at the message for a moment before replying. "Exactly what they taught me." I looked out for myself. The hours that followed were weirdly quiet. No new voicemails. No more calls. I think they were in shock. But I couldn't stop thinking about that moment when their faces shifted from arrogance to panic. I'd waited my entire life to see that. Still, this wasn't just revenge. It wasn't about petty payback. It was about breaking the cycle. About finally closing a chapter I'd been forced to keep open for 20 years. I pulled out a box from the storage closet in the corner of my office. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were pieces of my past. A birthday card from my dad that said, "Maybe this year you'll stop disappointing us." A printed email from my mom saying, "You're too soft. Life's going to eat you alive." A cracked old phone, one of those ancient Nokias with a saved recording I hadn't played in over a decade. I hit play. It was them, laughing in the car. After leaving me at that gas station. "Let's see how long it takes him to get home," Dad joked. "This'll teach him some respect," Mom added. I sat there, listening to their laughter fade into static. I'd kept that phone all these years. Not because I wanted to remember, but because a part of me needed proof. Needed to know I wasn't crazy. That it really happened. And now, I had all the proof I needed. Because tomorrow, the real demolition begins. Not just of the house of the lies. Of the fake family image they sold to everyone who would listen. I'm going to tell the truth. And then I'm going to bury it. For good. I wasn't planning to update anyone. Thought maybe after the office scene, after the eviction notice, that would be it. Quiet. Over. But that's not how people like my parents work. They don't retreat. They escalate. By the next morning, my inbox was a mess. Cousins I hadn't spoken to since high school were emailing me asking if it was true. My parents were calling every single relative we had, telling them I was throwing them out on the street. Some of the messages I got were polite, concerned. Others were vicious. Apparently, they told everyone I was rich now and refused to help the people who sacrificed everything for me. But they didn't expect me to have receipts. Literally. I spent that entire afternoon putting together a package. First, the voicemail recording from when I was 16, Dad and Mom laughing in the car after leaving me at that gas station. Then a few scanned birthday cards filled with passive-aggressive insults instead of love. Screenshots of old texts where they told me I was a failure or a waste of potential. I even included the school records showing how many times I was marked absent during the years they'd punish me by locking me out or making me walk miles to school in the rain. All organized. All time-stamped. All real. I mass emailed it to every relative they'd lied to. Uncles, aunts, cousins, even people I barely remembered. Subject line. What really happened? Please read before judging me. By noon, Julia called me crying. They lied to me, she whispered. They told me you ran away because you were doing drugs. That you stole from them. That they searched for you for years. I didn't say anything at first. I just let her cry. When she finally quieted down, I said, "Now you know." "I'm sorry," she said. "For believing them." "I don't blame you," I said. "You were a kid. You trusted them." "I did too, once." 2 days later, I called my parents. No, not to apologize. To invite them. To what? My mom asked suspiciously. To the demolition, I replied. She hung up. But they showed up anyway. The house, the one I grew up in, the one that held every memory I tried to bury, stood silent and empty. My team had already gone through it for inspection and safety prep. Permits were lined up. Bulldozers were parked ready. I was standing across the street with a coffee in one hand and a lawn chair in the other when they arrived. To my surprise, they weren't alone. My Aunt Carol's sister, Valerie, was with them. The same woman who'd taken me in when I was 16. Who gave me a second chance when my parents left me behind. Mom must have thought Valerie would talk some sense into me. Instead, Valerie gave me a hug. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You didn't let them break you." "Thanks," I said. "You're the reason I didn't." My parents stood nearby, quiet for once. No yelling. No threats. Just this blank, stunned silence. When the bulldozer moved forward and tore through the front porch, the one I used to sit on as a kid, trying not to cry, my mother started screaming. "My garden," she shrieked. "My roses. You bastard, you ruined it." Dad tried to shout something about lawsuits, but I didn't hear it. I was too focused on watching the wrecking ball cave in the living room. It was strangely cathartic. 20 years of emotional scars crushed under steel and concrete. But the best part? This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about purpose. See, I'd originally thought about selling the land for a profit. Prime location. Could have flipped it easily. But then I remembered what it felt like to be 16. Alone. Abandoned. Scared. Trying to figure out where to sleep that night. So I made a different decision. Instead of luxury housing, I'm building a 20-unit affordable housing complex. The focus will be on single parents and families in crisis, people like I was, like others still are. Applications will be handled by a nonprofit. Rent will be reasonable. And the place? It'll be called Valerie Haven after the woman who saved my life. She passed away last year from cancer. Never got to see what I built. But she knew I was working on something meaningful. She'd be proud. And that means more than revenge ever could. A week after the demolition, my parents came to my office again. This time they were quiet. Almost humble. Mom was holding a small folder. Dad had removed his usual scowl and replaced it with a fake sadness that didn't fool me. "We're sorry," she said. "We didn't realize how much we hurt you." Dad cleared his throat. "We're about to be homeless. We don't have many options." I nodded slowly, reached into my desk, pulled out a sheet of paper. "A rental application. You're welcome to apply for one of the new units. Same process as everyone else. Income check. Credit score. References." Their faces fell instantly. But we're your parents," Mom whispered. I looked her straight in the eye. "Exactly. After everything you did, this is the most generous offer I'm willing to make." Dad started up with his old routine, how they gave me life, how I'd never have made it without them. I just stood up and opened the door. "You can go now," I said. "And please, take your garden gnomes with you before the trucks haul away the debris." They left. Furious, ashamed, but powerless. They haven't contacted me since. Julia says they're staying at some cheap motel on the outskirts of town, claiming they're going to sue me. But they won't. They can't. Everything I did was legal. Every step of it documented. Every piece of it earned. I always thought revenge would feel like fire, hot, explosive, loud. But this was quiet. Cold. Final. And somehow better. It wasn't about getting back at them anymore. It was about taking back what they stole from me, my voice, my dignity, my future. I built a life without them. And now, on the very ground they tried to break me on, I'm building something that actually helps people. They threw away their son for a cruel lesson. Now they get to watch that lesson turn into something far bigger than they ever imagined. The past is gone. The house is gone. The fear is gone. And in its place, a home for people who need it most. And for me, peace. Real, earned, deserved peace.